Good afternoon and good afternoon. My name is Dr. James Smith Jr. and welcome back to another edition of the Dr. James Show. I am ecstatic to bring out our guest. I know I say that every week, but the level today is even greater. Our guest, Rayden Dittinger, has covered sports in Philadelphia for over 5 decades. He's a former columnist for the Philadelphia Daily News, the Philadelphia Bulletin, radio and TV broadcaster for WIP and NBC Sports Philadelphia, and an Emmy Award-winning filmmaker for NFL Films. He's also a writer, he's an author. And before I go even deeper into his interview, let's show a clip of Ray being introduced to the local Hall of Fame by his good friend, Glenn Mcdonald. Let's take a look.
A native of Southwest Philly, Ray Didinger grew up watching sports on the TV in his grandfather's bar on Woodland Avenue. He went to the Eagles training camp in Hershey with his parents, and he was at Franklin Field on December 26, 1960, when the Eagles won their last NFL championship. He still bears the scars of the Phillies' collapse in 1964. Ray Didinger has many, many fans. There are those who read his Eagles encyclopedia. There are those who attend his poignant play, Tommy and Me. There are those who listen to his insightful comments during the week and on weekends on 94 WIP All Sports Radio. There are those who watch him on Comcast Sportsnet. Among his biggest fans are the manufacturers of the yellow legal pads he's filled with copious notes compiled to break down every Eagles game and referenced on Eagles pregame and postgame programs on Comcast. Why are we fans of Ray? Let us catalog the ways. He's thoughtful, insightful, incisive, appropriately critical, efficient, personable, and more. Ray honed his reportorial skills over 30 years at the Bulletin and Daily News. He's won 6 Emmys for his work at NFL Films. He's the author of 11 books. A 1968 graduate of Temple University, Ray is a member of the School of Communications Hall of Fame. He was named Pennsylvania Sports Writer of the Year 5 times by the National Sports Writers and Sportscasters Association. He won the Dick McCann Award for long and distinguished coverage of pro football, and his name has been added to the writer's roll in the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. He's the first print journalist to have been inducted into the Philadelphia Sports Hall of Fame. Ray lives in Philadelphia and is a proud owner and big fan of English Bulldogs.
Please, please, please welcome to the Dr. James Show, Hall of Famer, Ray Didinger. Welcome to the show, my friend. Welcome to the show.
Dr. James, it's a pleasure to be with you.
Wow. I mentioned to the folks watching in the beginning that I was giddy. Interviewing someone who I've been following practically all my life. From reading your articles in the Bulletin, the Daily News, seeing you on TV, I'm like, Ray Didinger, thank you for making the time to join us when it's not NBC Sports Philadelphia, it's not in the NFL Films, it's the Dr. James Show.
It was very nice to meet you the other night at the Pyramid Club, and I was very flattered that you wanted me to be a guest, so I'm looking forward to this.
Oh, absolutely, Ray. When I saw you, I think it was in 2019, May 8th to be exact, we were at Daddy Pop's Counterculture, and I believe we both were guests for the show, and he does 6 shows when he does video record, and you and I both had an opportunity to record. Then we took a picture together, and I'm like, I'm standing next to Ray Didinger.
Yeah, that was a fun day. Grover's a good man.
He is. Look at those 6 Emmys. I think Glenn in his introduction said 11 books. It's 12 now. And
12.
Yeah. Ray, when you tell us about little Ray, when Ray was young, was Ray thinking about all the superlatives, all the accolades, Hall of Fame? Were you thinking about all of that? And to help jog the memory, here are some pictures of young Ray. Let's take a look. You have you, and it looks like Chuck Bednarik. We have you looking like Ron Jaworski. We have you interviewing on Channel 3, and you in the press booth. Talk to us about young Ray up to that point right there.
Well, I mean, I was born and raised in Philadelphia, in a family of really rabid football fans, rabid sports fans. And, the picture in the middle there, me as a 10-year-old, actually 9 years old, up at the Eagles training camp in Hershey, Pennsylvania. My mom and dad were such big Eagles fans that was our summer vacation every year when
Wow.
dad would get his 2 weeks off from the steel plant, while other families were going down to the Jersey Shore or up to the Poconos. We drove up to Hershey, Pennsylvania to watch the Eagles do two-a-days. And so that was the family I grew up in. And I suppose I suppose my destiny was determined during that time because, I fell in love with football. I fell in love with sports and decided along the way that writing was probably the thing that I did the best. It was probably the thing that I enjoyed the most. And I decided I was going to be a writer. And then I just decided, well, okay, if I'm going to be a writer, what do I want to write about? And it was pretty clear to me that the thing I loved the most in the whole world was sports. So, okay, now I know I want to write and I know I love sports. So somehow I'd like to fold those two together. And I was lucky enough I was doubly lucky. I was lucky enough that it happened for me. And it happened for me right here in Philadelphia. I never had to leave. I never had to go somewhere else and, find a job and work my way back.
Yeah.
I graduated from Temple on a Friday, started work at the Delaware County Daily Times on Monday. And then a year later, got hired by the Philadelphia Bulletin. And I've been doing what I do for the last 53 years.
We have a lot in common. We're both writers. My undergrad degree is in English from Widener University. We're both authors. You've written 12, I've written 3. The Temple connection, master's from Temple, doctor from Temple, and going to Eagles not preseason, but camp. Because Widener, the Eagles used to practice at Widener. So when I was a freshman, I got a chance to see them practice every day. But I think I heard you said when you were going to those camps, you would look at the players and then you would look at the writers and then you would look at the players and look at the writers and you decided you were going to join the writers. Is that true?
Yeah, pretty much. I would have loved to have been a player, but I didn't have that kind of skill. So to be around it, okay, if I can't be with those guys, I'll try and be with those guys. And, the writers and the broadcasters and all the guys on the sidelines that were watching the practice and recording and reporting on it, that seemed to be more attainable, I suppose. And so those guys, in many respects, those guys, the Bill Campbells, the Huey Browns, the Jack McKinneys, the guys who covered the team, became as much role models to me as the players did. They became to me as important and significant as the players were. And I just decided that looks like something I would like to do. And then, then the problem was, or the question was, could I ever attain that? Because to get in that group, to be able to be hired and be in a position to do what they're doing is almost as hard, maybe even harder than getting on the field. So, but I decided that journalism was the career I wanted to pursue. And if I'm going to be in journalism, I might as well be writing about something I love. And sports and football was something I loved. And I was very, very fortunate because I got the opportunity to do it at a really early age. I went to the Philadelphia Bulletin, and after covering high schools for 1 year, Huey Brown, the guy who had been covering the Eagles for like 30 years, retired. And the sports editor told me that starting next season, you'll be covering the Eagles. And I was only 23 years old. I was the youngest beat man in the NFL. And it was a big challenge, but it was a wonderful opportunity.
Wonderful, wonderful. Ray, I heard, correct me if I'm wrong, that you were young and you went to the games, that your parents told you it was not good to boo. You weren't allowed to boo. And we take heat for booing our own. Is that true? No booing? Was that the Dittinger rule?
Pretty much. We used to go to the games in a group. My grandfather owned a bar on Woodland Avenue in Southwest Philadelphia. And that was pretty much where I grew up, hanging out at the bar, playing shuffleboard, listening to the men talk about sports. And during the football season, my grandfather would charter a bus every Sunday, and the bus would pull up next to the bar on Sunday morning and would all pile on and would all head off to, well, either Connie Mack Stadium or later Franklin Field to watch the Eagles game. And we all of the gentlemen, all the men there, and whatever women there were, all bought their tickets in a block. They all bought their season tickets through my grandfather so that we could all sat together.
Yeah.
And the general rule was, you don't boo. You just don't boo your team. And that was the way I was raised. It was, look, they weren't very good for many of those years, and they were pretty bad for a lot of those years. But the feeling was, hey, win or lose, they're still your team. So there was no booing. There was a lot of booing other places in the stadium, but it was understood if you were part of the Ray's Tavern season ticket block, you cheered, but you didn't boo.
I love it. Ray's Tavern. Ray, you've been covering sports 53 plus years. What's the most memorable event that you covered? Now, I know you've done Flyers, you've done Sixers, you've done Phillies, you've done Eagles. Over 53 years, was there one that you would say most memorable?
Yeah, Super Bowl 52. Super Bowl 52. Eagles,
Why?
when they finally won it. Well, when they finally won it, I mean, that was, I had covered the 2 Flyers Stanley Cups. I had covered the 2 Phillies World Series. I had covered the Sixers run to the championship with Dr. J and Moses Malone. The one missing piece was the Eagles winning a Super Bowl. And that was probably, in my mind, kind of the paramount. That was kind of the one that I really wanted because I was an Eagles fan before I was anybody else's fan.
Ray, did you think it was actually going to happen in your lifetime?
I had my doubts. I had my doubts, like a lot of people. I mean, all of us in Philadelphia, we heard people say, I hope I live long enough to see the Eagles win a Super Bowl. I hope I'm still alive when the Eagles win a Super Bowl. I mean, that was a very real fear with a lot of people that, okay, they might do this, but I might not be around to see it. I shared that a little bit. I certainly didn't see it coming in 2017, when that year started. You had Doug Peterson was only in his second year as a head coach. You didn't really know what you had in Carson Wentz.
No.
It was a team that you kind of had a feeling was getting a little bit better. But at the start of that season, there was certainly no sense that this was a team that was actually going to get to a Super Bowl, much less win it. But when it happened, it took on about mid-season. You just kind of felt the momentum building.
Yeah.
And, people use the term team of destiny. And I always thought that's kind of nonsense. I don't think that's real. But it sure felt real with that team.
It did.
And from mid-season on, and certainly by the time it got to the playoffs, I think we all felt that this team had a chance to do something pretty special. So if you're talking about what's my one kind of career highlight, the one that I'll always remember above all else, yeah, it was absolutely Super Bowl 52 out in Minneapolis. Just watching that game and then watching the celebration, watching all those Eagles fans that were filling that stadium that day, watching them all celebrate far into the night. That was really, really, that was really a highlight.
And I was one of those people partying well into the night. I was downtown with my daughter, crying, didn't see it coming at first, but I'm ridiculously optimistic, hopeful, romantic, and things started to fall in place. You lose your quarterback, everyone's against us, and next thing you know it, bam. I want to show a picture of you pre-game. I believe you're getting ready to call the game. Tell us about what you were thinking right at that moment.
Well, that's the NBC Sports Philly pregame show, and it's Michael going left to right. Michael Barkan, the host, Barrett Brooks, who played a dozen years in the NFL and won a Super Bowl with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then there's me, and then to the far right there's Seth Joyner, the great Seth Joyner, who played for the Eagles and then later won in his final year, in his final game in the NFL, finally won a Super Bowl. You can see the ring on his finger. Yes. He won it as a member of the Denver Broncos. It's very funny. You see both of those guys wearing their Super Bowl rings that day. They didn't wear them all year. Because frankly, a Super Bowl ring is such a big piece of jewelry. You really can't wear it as an everyday piece of jewelry. It's just too big. So most of these guys just have it in a safe deposit box. But both Barrett and Seth decided going to the Super Bowl with the Eagles that day, they would break out the Super Bowl ring. So that you see them both wearing them there that day. And that was us getting ready. We were in a little bubble there. We weren't sitting out in the open, thank God, because it was 20 degrees below zero. But there was a little glass bubble there, and we're in front of the stadium. That big glass building you see behind us is the stadium in Minneapolis. And we did a 2-hour pregame show running up to Super Bowl 52. Pretty memorable.
I love it. I love it. It's ironic, Ray, that in the championship game where the Eagles played the Vikings, I was in Singapore teaching for the Rutgers Executive MBA program. And I got on the plane when the Eagles were down, I believe 7-0.
Right.
And as I was boarding, I heard noise, and I think it was Patrick Robinson's interception. I boarded the plane. It was a 7-hour flight to our layover. I had no idea. Once we landed, I ran to one of those lounges, turned on the computer, and I'm in there, yay.
You describe it very well. I mean, that is how it happened. The Vikings scored first, and they were actually had the ball and were driving for another score. And Chris Long got a good rush on the quarterback, Case Keenum, and hit him as he was letting the ball go. Ball kind of fluttered, and Patrick Robinson intercepted it and brought it back as a pick six, and just totally flipped the game. The crowd just went absolutely crazy, and from that point on, that only tied the score. But from that point on, the Eagles were in complete control of the game. I mean, that one play, if Minnesota takes it down, scores again, and it's a 14-0, it's a whole different situation. But that play, that pick six and score, even though it just tied the score, gave the Eagles kind of a momentum kind of thing, and got the crowd into the game to an extent that from that point on, they were in complete control.
Love it. I love it. Now, Ray, we showed a picture of you pregame. We have another picture of you post-game. I want you to tell us what you were thinking at that juncture. Let's look at the picture of you post-game. Let's show that right now. Let's take a look. What's happening here, Ray?
Just feeling the moment. That was, I had my son was at the game working. He was a cameraman for NFL Films. And he was he was shooting the Nick Foles wire in that game. People that have seen the highlight film of Super Bowl 52 know that Nick Foles was wearing a wire, an NFL Films wire in his pads that day. And my son was the cameraman that was assigned to shoot that. So his camera never left Nick Foles that whole game. Wow. He had Nick Foles on camera and listening to everything Nick Foles said from the time he came out the tunnel for warm-ups until after the trophy presentation on the field. And so my son actually shot that famous exchange on the sidelines between Foles and Doug Peterson, where Foles says, "Hey, you want to do Philly, Philly?" And Peterson says, "Yeah, let's do it." That shot that every fan in Philadelphia has seen a million times and will be played in this city forever was actually shot by my son. So after the game, he had told me before the game, he said, if the Eagles win this game, I'm going to find you wherever you're doing the post-game show, and we're going to celebrate. And sure enough, when the game was over and he finished packing up his equipment, he found us. We were in a booth up on the mezzanine, and he found us, and he came in and walked onto the set, and he and I hugged, and all that emotion sort of just came out.
I think we have some footage of that. Let's take a look at Ray and his son post Super Bowl immediately right after the game. Let's take a look.
There it is, a long time coming. Woo! David Dittinger, who is a who shoots for, there we go. That's a beautiful thing. A beautiful, beautiful thing.
I was crying. I was crying at that. I'm supposed to be non-biased. I was happy.
Oh, sure. Oh, sure. Yeah, it was something that I didn't feel particularly comfortable with at the time, because I knew how many people were watching. I mean, that's going down on live television, and I knew what the TV audience was like back in Philadelphia. And I've always tried to conduct myself as a true professional journalist, you know. And
you do it well.
yeah, and and there was certainly a feeling that I think everybody knew that I was happy that the Eagles had won. I made no mistake of the fact that I was happy that the Eagles had won. But to have the emotion come out the way it did, that actually led to me actually crying. It was purely a result of my son actually finding me, and then when we hugged, it brought back memories of the 1960 championship game, where I was at Franklin Field with my parents and with my grandparents and celebrating with them. And all of those memories kind of came rushing back there when I hugged my son. And in fact, what I say to him as we're hugging was, I said, that was for Grandpa. Because my father had always said that the one thing he wanted in life was he wanted to be there to see the Eagles win a Super Bowl. And he had been through the loss and the Super Bowl loss in New Orleans, and he had suffered through the Super Bowl loss in Jacksonville. And he had passed away 2 years before the Eagles finally did win it in Minnesota. So at that moment, that's what I said to David. I said, that was for Grandpa, because I just felt like, what that would have meant for him to actually be there to see that. But the fact that the two of us were there to celebrate it together,
that was amazing.
Was really pretty special. And the response that moment got, the letters that I got, the emails I got, the people, total strangers just reaching out to me saying, that was a beautiful moment. And, next to the Philly special, to me, that was the highlight of the night, all that kind of thing. I guess what it really says, James, is that moment that I was having with my son there was happening all over Philadelphia. I mean, that was happening in living rooms all over the Delaware Valley. So what we were feeling, what we were experiencing it was almost like, we sort of had our arms around the whole Delaware Valley at that moment. And I think everybody understood exactly what we were feeling, because they were feeling it too.
Now, Ray, something symbolic happened that morning, I believe, with an eagle where it landed. You want to tell us that story?
Yeah, it was actually the day before.
Okay.
We were, I was out in Minnesota, and my wife had not made the trip. She was still home. And I called home on Saturday just to check in, see how everything was. And she said to me, she said, I have to tell you something pretty amazing. She said, there's an eagle flying over our house this morning. Now, we lived kind of right on the edge of Fairmount Park. So we had stuff flying over the house all the time, geese, pigeons, blue jays, you name it. But we had never seen an eagle, never. We had been in that house for 32 years. There had never been an eagle over our house. And my wife said, this morning I was looking out and I looked up and there was this bird circling over our house. And she said, I got the binoculars just to check. And sure enough, it was a true bald eagle. And at one point it actually landed on our garage, and then circled some more. And she said that we had never seen that before. And she said, I don't know. She said, I just have a feeling that that's the spirit of your mother and your father. Why would it be here the day before the Eagles played in the Super Bowl if there wasn't some kind of a connection? And, I felt the same way. I said, you know what? As crazy as it sounds, I believe that, and I can tell you that eagle never came back. It was there. It had never been there before. It was never there again. So, I mean, you can laugh all you want. You can scoff all you want. But I will always believe that was some sort of symbolism. That was a message that this was going to be the Eagles' day. And indeed it was.
Ray, it was a special time. I remember the game was over. The parade was supposed to be on Tuesday. I had a business trip to Denver. I wouldn't be getting back until Thursday. The weather was bad on Tuesday. The parade was postponed until Thursday. I had a red-eye flight back from Denver, got to Philly Thursday morning, changed clothes, and went to the parade. Special time, special time. There's a question in the chat room that says, doing great television, radio, and writing seems like a wonderful dream. However, what are some sports media challenges people don't see and are not aware of? So essentially, you doing all these things, TV, radio, you're writing, and you look angelic, you look perfect, but we don't see what goes on behind the scenes when you're writing the book, before you do the show, before you do the radio show. Behind the scenes, any challenges?
Yeah, there are. The challenge in writing is just the writing. Writing was a real struggle for me. I mean, there were other guys in the press box that the writing came easy to them. And boy, I envied those guys. Stan Hochman, Bill Lyon, Mark Wicker.
Yes.
I mean, those were guys that they could just sit down and put their hands on the keyboard and it just flowed. And with me, it was hours upon hours of write a sentence, rip the paper out, crumple it up, throw it away.
You were on a deadline. You were on a deadline, right?
Yeah, but see, I always worked for afternoon newspapers, which don't exist anymore. Every paper, those that do exist, everything's a morning paper now. The Philadelphia Bulletin was, at the time that I joined them, the largest afternoon newspaper in America.
Wow.
Had a circulation of about 300,000. And so the deadline, because it was an afternoon paper, the deadline was 4 o'clock in the morning. So if you had a game and you had an Eagles game that started at 1 and it ended at 4, I had till 4 o'clock the next morning to write my story. So you could do a lot of rewriting, and I did. I was guilty of that. I couldn't let it go until I was on deadline. I just kept thinking I could make it better, and I would rewrite, and I would rewrite, and I would rewrite. And it was the same thing at the Daily News. When I went to the Daily News, they were an afternoon newspaper with also a very late deadline. So I could take my time, and I could rethink, and I could rewrite, and so the writing was really, really a struggle. Everybody said when I first got into the business, don't worry. I mean, you're just trying to be a perfectionist. But the more you do this, the longer you stay in the business, you'll get faster. It'll just start coming easier to you. It never did. I mean, I was writing for 30 years and it never got easier. So from the writing standpoint, the hard part was just the struggle of writing, the creative process. It never came easily to me. As far as the broadcasting, the radio and television, the hard part is the fear factor, just the nervousness about being on the radio or on live, being on the radio live, being on television live. That's, I envy the guys to whom it comes naturally. I envy somebody like Michael Barkan, who the light comes on and he's fearless. I mean, he just lets it go, and he's such a natural. I envy it. For me, it's every one of them is I'm Carl Wallenda on the high wire. I mean, it's just every step I think is going to be my last. So that's
Ray, you and I have that in
that's
common
the hard
too.
part.
We have that in common too. As a speaker, I'm always on, but right before the curtain opens and I'm introduced, those butterflies, even doing a Zoom show, butterflies, virtual presentations, butterflies for the first 5 minutes or so. I tell my story, then I'm ready to rock and roll. But in the beginning, I do feel those butterflies. Ray, speaking of butterflies, making the transition from print journalist to writing for NFL films, reviewing films, what was that transition like?
Harder than I thought. I kind of thought I spent 30 years in newspapers writing about football. When Steve Sable hired me to become a full-time producer at NFL Films, I knew it was an adjustment. I knew now I'm writing for television. but I'm still writing about football.
Mm.
You know, how hard can it be? It was really hard. It was harder than I expected. Just the difference of writing for a printed page and the screen are really different. That whole economy of words, you know, having to say more with fewer words, was really a challenge. You know, if you're writing for a newspaper, I could write pieces, you know, have that blank sheet of paper and you write 1,000 words, you know, sit down and you have all the time in the world to paint that picture with your words. You go on television, you go writing for television, especially at NFL Films, you don't have that time. You don't have that space. You know, what you're writing, you're just writing stuff to just fit in between the sound bites and the music and the radio calls. They're just these 8-second, 9-second holes here and there that you were just kind of spackling with information. And it's a whole different kind of writing. And it requires a lot of discipline to, you know, if you're writing 1,000-word or 1,500-word piece, you know, you can go on and on.
Yeah.
But if you're writing for TV, you have to be very economical, and you also have to write to the voice of the narrator. You know, you have to write in his voice, and you can't make your sentences too long because the narrator will run out of breath. You know, a sentence that would look and read beautifully in a newspaper, you give that to a narrator, if there's no commas or no periods, you know, he's going to run out of breath in trying to read it. So you have to understand the voice of your narrator, who your narrator is. Does he, you know, how does he like to deliver it? And give him a copy, as John Facenda used to always say, the great John Facenda, who was the voice of NFL Films. You know, he would always say to his producer, "Okay, you've given me a horse I can ride." And when you're the guy writing the script, that's what you have to do. You always have to give the narrator a horse he can ride.
Ray, you talk about assists in helping the person out. You just gave me a sweet assist. John Facenda. We're going to play a brief video with John narrating. And I want you to, I'm biased. I want you to tell me your thoughts about the person he's talking about and help me understand why this person isn't in the Hall of Fame. Let's take a look at one, Billy, White Shoes, Johnson, Widener Zone. Let's take a look at this video and talk a little bit about Billy.
The Oiler big play man was little number 84, Billy Johnson, a slippery escape artist who can turn a simple punt return into a geometry lesson. Opposing bomb squatters soon learned about Johnson's style. It's improvised, made up on the spot, because to number 84, the shortest distance between 2 points is any way he's heading. The fifth.
All right, Ray. Billy White Shoes Johnson, Widener Zone, could have played for the Eagles. Would you have drafted him? Why isn't he in the Hall of Fame? Help me out right here.
Well, you picked one of my favorite players and one of my favorite people. Billy White Shoes was a special guy. I saw him play in high school. I saw him play at Chichester High School. I saw him play at Widener. In fact, when I was covering the Eagles in '74, I guess, and it was the draft, the NFL draft was going on, and it was the final day of the draft, and we're down into rounds 12, 13, 14, and teams are just drafting guys here. You know, they're drafting trackmen, they're drafting baton twirlers, they're drafting, you know, they're drafting high jumpers, and Billy Johnson's still sitting on the board. And the Eagles coach at that time was a guy named Mike McCormick. Man, you know, I got along well with Mike, so I pulled him aside at one point and I said, "Hey, Mike, you know, you got to draft Billy Johnson. You know, you really, I mean, he's sitting right there." I said, "You got to draft him." And Mike said, "Nah, he's too small." And I said, "Mike," I said, "you know, look, okay, I know he's a running back at Widener, and he's probably not big enough to be a running back in the NFL." I said, "But I guarantee you, at the barest minimum, he can return kicks at the barest minimum. And I said, and it also wouldn't surprise me that you could make him into a really good flanker or wide receiver. I said, but at the bare minimum, he can certainly return kicks in the NFL. And maybe you could make him into a receiver. Nah, he's too small, too small. And he said, plus, our training camp is in Widener now. And, you know, if we draft Billy and then we have to cut him, then it's going to cause hard feelings with the people at the university. And so, nah. And I said, I'm telling you, you get to 15th round. What do you got to lose? You know, no. So turns out like 15 minutes later, we hear the Houston Oilers, you know, draft Billy White Shoes Johnson. And of course he joins the Oilers and becomes not just a good player, but a great player. And winds up playing 12 years in the NFL. And at the time that he retired as the NFL's all-time kick returner. Like in terms of combined kick return yardage, he was number one when he retired. Now a few guys have passed him, Devin Hester and a few of those guys. But at the time that Billy retired, he went out as the number one kick return guy. To your point about why isn't he in the Hall of Fame, I've tried to make that argument. I've tried to advance the cause of Billy Johnson because, you know, the Hall of Fame voters, and I was one for 15 years. They kind of don't give special teams their due. It took forever to get the first kicker in. You know, Jan Stenerud,
yes,
from Kansas City. Jan Stenerud, because as being the first true soccer-style kicker to come to the NFL, changed special teams play forever. I mean, he legitimized the soccer-style kicker. So I thought this guy absolutely should be in the Hall of Fame. I had to move heaven and earth to get guys to consider Jan Stenerud. And if we finally, just a couple of years ago, finally got the first punter in, Ray Guy from the Raiders. And so that's everybody these guys in the voting room, it's all, they're just special teams guys. They're just special teams guys. Well, special teams is 1/3 of the game, you know, so, you know, maybe 1/3 of the guys in the Hall of Fame should be special teams guys. And if you're really going to give them their due, and you're going to consider a return man, then, you know, Billy Johnson has got to be on that list. Now, it'll be interesting to see this year in the Hall of Fame to see if Devin Hester gets in, because there's a chance that he could possibly get in. And if he gets in, then he'll be the first kick returner to be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So maybe if he can open that door, maybe, you know, in a couple of years, Billy Johnson might be able to walk through it. Billy and I actually played professional softball together. We were on the same softball team, the Philadelphia Athletics, 1978. We played our home games at Veterans Stadium before crowds of about 50 people.
Now where were you? Third base, shortstop?
With Billy was a center fielder.
How about you, Ray?
I played third base.
Yeah, you were third, hot corner.
I played third base, and we went to the World Series that year. We went to the softball World Series, lost to the team from Cleveland, but I got to spend that summer playing softball with Billy Johnson, and I still say he was the fastest thing I ever saw on a ball diamond. He could circle those bases, boy.
Well, Ray, I want to introduce you to another fast person. Is also a person that you moved heaven and earth, I believe, to get into the Hall of Fame. It's one of your idols, if not your idol, Tommy Mcdonald. We have a picture of you with Tommy, with you being the person who introduced him during the Hall of Fame. So let's take a picture. Let's take a look at the picture of you and Tommy Mcdonald. Then if you can talk to us about the love affair with Tommy, dating back to when you were young, the play you've since developed as a result. Talk to us about you and one number 25 out of, I believe, Oklahoma?
Correct, University of Oklahoma. He was an All-American at Oklahoma and did not lose a game in his entire career at Oklahoma. 3 varsity seasons, they were 31-0, never lost a game. And he was the best player on that team. But when it came time for the NFL, similar to Billy White Shoes, the teams looked at him and said, he's too small. He was 5'9" and 170 pounds. The Eagles took him in the 3rd round, and he immediately became, and I was only a 10-year-old kid, a 10-year-old Eagles fan, but he immediately became my favorite player because he was so little. he just looked like a little kid out there on the field playing with those Giants. And as a little kid, my eye was just drawn to him, and he was so good. I mean, he was such a great player, so exciting, so fearless. The Eagles drafted him and didn't quite know what to do with him. They tried him at halfback, tried him on defense. They finally decided to make him a receiver, and he quickly became one of the, if not the best wide receiver in the NFL. And I got to meet him. As I said, we went up, my family, we used to go up to Eagles training camp at Hershey. And I used to wait outside the locker room for him. And he would come out the locker room, and he would hand me his helmet. And I would walk with him to the practice field. And we did that every summer for his whole time with the Eagles. And he got so used to seeing me and us taking those walks together, they started calling me little brother. And then, of course, his career ends and my career kind of begins. And in those years in between, I never told him about that I was the kid with the helmet. I never told him that. When I would see him at events, at Eagles games, or I would see him at the Maxwell Club dinner, and I had to interview him for various stories, anniversary of this or anniversary of that. I would interview him and we would talk and we would have a good time, but I never referenced, hey, do you remember me, that I was the kid from, I didn't want to go there. To me, it just didn't seem, I was kind of afraid he wouldn't remember, actually, and that would have hurt my feelings. So it kind of went unspoken. But I knew one time I asked him, you had such a great career and you won a world championship here in 1960 and 6-time Pro Bowler. You had such a great career. Are there any regrets? Is there anything that you kind of left unfinished? And he said, well, I kind of thought that I might have a shot at getting in the Hall of Fame. That's like the ultimate, but I guess it's probably not going to happen now. So it just so happened that I was a Hall of Fame voter. So I was sort of on the inside and I was able to start campaigning for him, which I did. And it took, I had to bang on that door for a long time, but finally in 1998, he did get elected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And lo and behold, when it came time to pick his presenter, the person to present him for induction, he picked me, which I never expected. And so we had that wonderful, and you saw the photograph, that wonderful weekend out in Canton, Ohio, where I got to ride in the open convertible in the parade with my boyhood hero, and then go to the Hall of Fame and stand there and present him when he realized his dream to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. To be part of that whole thing was such a unique and special experience that I just kind of had this feeling that I wanted to tell that story. I mean, to me, it's such an unusual and just a wonderful feel-good kind of story about why kids love sports, hero worship, dreams coming true. I just thought this is really a lovely story, and I'd like to tell it. So I just sat down, started writing a play about that whole experience, and it wound up getting produced, and it's been produced now 6 times, and called Tommy and Me, and we've done it at the Fringe Arts Theater in Philadelphia. We did it at Plays and Players in Rittenhouse Square. We did it at the Media Theater, and this past October we did it at the Delaware Theater Company in Wilmington. And we have 5 theaters that want to do it in 2022. So Tommy and Me will come back, and it's been. I mean, I never expected it to have this kind of life, but people just relate to the story, and they really, really do love it. And the best part about it was Tommy lived to see it. Tommy passed away a few years ago, but he did get to see Tommy and Me. He came the first year that we did it with his wife, with the kids, with the grandchildren, and they all came to the play together, and he loved it. He loved the play, and hung around afterwards and signed autographs and posed for pictures for an hour and a half, and just loved it. So to be able to kind of give him that gift after all he had done for me, it was really a very lovely thing, and that's one of the high points of the last 50 years was writing the play, seeing it finally produced, seeing my words brought to life on the stage, and then having Tommy there to see it himself and enjoy it as much as he did was really, really very lovely.
What a gift. What a gift. Time for another gift. In the chat room, someone says, Ray, what advice would you give a young person wanting to be in sports media today? Any advice from a Luke Klein award-winning journalist? Any advice?
Be patient. Be patient. There's a lot of competition out there. It's a tough field to break into. Everybody, when they graduate from college, they have their aspirations, as they should. But where you want to go is not generally where you start. Everybody that has a communications degree, they want to start at ESPN, or they want to start at CNN, or if you're a print journalist, you want to write for Sports Illustrated, or you want to write for the New York Times. And that's fine as an aspiration, but you have to understand that you're not going to step right off the campus into that job. You're going to have to work your way there. And that first job you get probably isn't exactly the job you're looking for, and it's not going to pay you exactly what you want it to pay you. And it may require you to move away and get a job. That job might be in Albuquerque, New Mexico, but if that's the best job, okay, you got to start there and hope that you can work your way back to the job that you really want. And sometimes it's frustrating, this isn't the job that I want. Well, it's where you start. It's that first rung on the ladder, but you have to believe enough in yourself and your own ability that, okay, this isn't where I want to stay, but this is where I'll start, and I'll just climb from here. And that's it. I mean, you just have to be patient, believe enough in yourself, and just work your butt off. And you're going to need some breaks. You're going to, you have to kind of sometimes be in the right place at the right time, work for the right boss, make the right connections. But if that's really what you feel like you want to do, you really want to be in that job, and you want to be a journalist, or you want to be in the sports writing, or you want to be a broadcaster, if that's really what you feel in your heart of hearts, you got to do it. You got to go for it. Don't settle for something else. Doctor, I hear this all the time. I'll run into guys who are in their 30s, mid 30s, and they'll say, boy, I envy you so much, because you're doing exactly what I always wanted to do. I'm a sports fan. I love sports. I spend the weekends just watching the games, and, I'm season ticket holder here, and I read everything, and I love all the sports, and I wanted to be in the sports, but I couldn't get a job. I wanted to be a sports writer, but I couldn't get a job. So now I'm in sales, or now I'm doing this. And, I'd love to get back into it. Or do you think I could get back into it? Is it too late to get back into it? And don't be that guy. If that's really what you feel like you want to do, don't be in that position where you're saying, God, I wish I could be doing what you're doing. If that's really what you believe that you're meant to do, and that's what's going to make you happy, then you just got to tough it out and hope that you can work your way into that position.
There's no crying in journalism, right?
No.
Right. Chat room says, how do you feel about the lack of diversity in the NFL coaching fraternity? And what are your thoughts on Brian Flores? I mean, what's happening now? Your thoughts on what's happening in the NFL, the Rooney Rule, the lack of diversity in coaching, as well as Brian Flores. Any initial thoughts?
Yeah, it's shameful. It's shameful. I just did a chat with Seth Joyner. He has his own podcast show, and we were talking about this. And I thought Seth said it very well. You've got 73% of the players in the National Football League are African American or minority, and you have this paltry representation of them as assistant coaches, coordinators, head coaches, general managers. It shouldn't be, and the message that's being sent to the players is, I want you here as a player to help me. I want you here to play, and I'll have you here to play to help me win a championship. And you guys, you can come here and you can help me win a championship, but you're not good enough to coach my team. Well, what kind of a message is that? It's very frustrating to me. It's very frustrating to me because I remember in 1984, I was at the Daily News, and I did a series of articles, 5-part series, ran for a whole week, about minority hiring practices in pro football. And this was before Art Shell had become the first African-American head coach in the modern era with the Raiders. Art had just retired as a player. He was an assistant coach, but he was not yet a head coach. So there were no African-American coaches in the entire NFL. And the ratio of black players in the NFL was pretty much what it is today. And there were none. And I wrote this, I interviewed all these people in football, and, you know, all the owners and all the people at the top, they all said, yeah, you know, you're right. And we need to do better. We need to change this. We need to be more inclusive. We need to get more of these guys as coordinators working their way up. Well, you know, I mean, it was all lip service. There was no real commitment to it. And you're seeing that the NFL is in that same situation. And, you know, I saw, you know, Brian Flores, I give him credit. It's a tremendous, it was very courageous what he did.
Courageous.
It was very courageous because, I mean, he was a guy that he did a really good job coaching in Miami. He took over a bad situation, coached them back-to-back winning seasons. Team played hard for him. And at the end of the year, he's let go. And David Culley down in Houston was handed an awful situation down there. And actually, I thought coached his butt off to win 4 games with that team after the whole Deshaun Watson kerfluffle. I thought David Culley did a terrific job. He gets fired. Now you're down to just one coach, and it was Mike Tomlin at that point. And that's when this whole thing came to the fore. And when Brian Flores stepped forward and filed this suit and made his claim that this, and basically told everybody that this stinks and this has to change, my thought was, okay, let's see how many guys will stand with him. You know, he stepped forward. He was the one that took on the league. He's the one that said, this isn't right, and I'm prepared to fight it. But I think the idea was now you had to see other guys get behind him and stand with him and put a united front out there. And I was disappointed that more guys did. And I'm not just talking about coaches. I'm talking about players too and executives. This was the time to step up. Yeah. This was the time for all those guys to step up to the plate. Brian Flores did it and put his career on the line, and nobody stood behind him. Now, what happened was you began to see public opinion began to push back against the league. And it was what I found interesting was the day after, or actually the day that Brian Flores filed his suit, the NFL's official response was, this has no merit. That was what they said initially. But within 4 days, all of a sudden, Roger Goodell comes out and says, oh, you know, we really need to, we really need to be more diverse. We really need. So what happened was there was so much pushback off their statement about no merit. So many people said, what are you talking about? That all of a sudden the league goes, okay, we got to back off of that. And that's when they came out, and Goodell has now a couple times had these statements where, yeah, we really need to look at this and we really need to do better, blah, blah, blah. But they saw the public reaction to it was, no, this isn't right, and something needs to be done. But the one thing I would say about this is, and to me, this kind of bottom lines the whole thing. Mm-hmm. There was a period in the 40s when there were no black players in the NFL, none. They started bringing black players in, the Marion Motleys, the Bill Willises, the Woody Strouds, those guys, and then opened the door to the Jim Browns and the Bobby Mitchells and the Gale Sayers's. And you brought black players in, and it became a better game. Okay. Then the next frontier was the black quarterback. I mean, for years you had all these guys, and if they brought you in the NFL, they'd take you and make you a defensive back or make you a running back. But no, you can't play quarterback. But then guys finally got the opportunity, and you had Warren Moon, and Doug Williams wins a Super Bowl, and you have Randall Cunningham. And now all of a sudden, there are so many black quarterbacks, like nobody even thinks about it anymore. But again, it became, you got the black quarterbacks, it became a better game. Brought in black players, the game got better. You got black quarterbacks, the game got better. The next frontier now is black coaches and giving them the opportunity. And I've been telling you, it would just be the same way. The game would improve. That would improve the game just as the quarterbacks and the players did. It's just the next step in that evolution. And it's taken us way too long to get there.
It's taken us too long. It certainly isn't, right? I would be remiss if I didn't move to the next question, because time is getting away. But As a person who travels around the world speaking, I always get this thought or this question or this narrative. The Philly fans stink. You guys threw a snowball at Santa Claus. You guys stink. We have a picture of you with one of our national detractors, Michael Wilbon, and a picture of one of Philadelphia Eagles' biggest fans, Sean. Your reactions to the narrative that we're terrible fans, we threw a snowball at Santa Claus. If you want to briefly tell that story, because we take hits nonstop.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, it's a silly, lazy argument. But I mean, it's the label we have, and I hate to say it, but we're never going to shake it. I mean, you know, the guys in the national media, like Mike Wilbon, who's a nice fellow. I've known Mike a long time, but he just has a real issue with Philadelphia fans. I've tried to talk him out of it unsuccessly. So, but look, you can't deny, did Philadelphia fans throw snowballs at Santa Claus? Yeah, they did. I mean, I was there. It was Franklin Field, final game of the 1968 season. Yeah,
please tell this story. People need to hear it.
Well, no, I mean, it was, you got to put it in, this sounds like a cop-out, but you have to put it in context. I mean, it was the end of the 1968 season. The Eagles were a terrible team. It was the final year of Joe Kuharich. The team, it looked like they were going to go winless the whole year and get the first pick in the draft. And the first pick in the draft that year, everybody knew was going to be O.J. Simpson. And so the fans it was kind of like they kind of reconciled themselves that, okay, we're the worst team in the league. We're going to lose every game. But when it's all said and done, we're going to get O.J. And then right at the point where it looked like O.J. was a lock, the Eagles won 2 games. They won 2 games and it didn't matter anymore. And you're at a point now where you want them to lose, and then they won. Okay, so you can imagine the frustration. It's a bad season that becomes even a worse season because you're now won 2 games and lost the one thing that was worth actually winning. And there was the residual bad feeling for Kuharich. Everybody hated him. The owner, Jerry Wallman, was going bankrupt. The fans were so in rebellion that they had chartered one of those private planes to fly over Franklin Field, trailing a banner that said "Joe must go." All of this stuff was happening, and the Eagles were playing their final game at home on a snowy day against the Vikings. And at halftime, they brought out this scraggly Santa Claus who had a bag with some cheap candy canes, and he walks around the track at Franklin Field throwing candy canes into the crowd while the PA man says, "And the Philadelphia Eagles wish you all a Merry Christmas." Oh, come on. How much can people stand? And it just started with like a couple people just picked up snow and threw it at Santa. It started off with just a couple of people, but then everybody kind of got the idea. And as Santa was working his way around the bottom of the horseshoe, all of a sudden, those couple of snow Santa had to like run for cover. So,
no, right, you said that
did it happen? Yeah, it happened.
Was scrawny, right? He was real skinny. They couldn't get a big Santa, right?
No, that's true. There was a real Santa was supposed to show up, and for whatever reason, perhaps he knew what was waiting for him. The real Santa didn't even make it to Franklin Field. But there was a guy in the stands who came to the game dressed as Santa, and they pulled him out of the stands and handed him the bag of candy canes and told him to walk on the track, and that's what happened. But anyway, that became the narrative of Philadelphia fans and why Philadelphia fans were terrible and why they were vicious. And that was 1968, Doc, and we're still living with it today. And I've always thought it was misguided. I've always thought it was wrong. I think the Philadelphia fans are honestly the best. I think they're the smartest. I think that they're very knowledgeable. And they've been through a lot. They've been through a lot of long, tough seasons. The Phillies have lost more games than any team in organized sports. It's a matter of record. It's true. You know, the Eagles had never won a Super Bowl until just a couple of years ago. It's been a city that's lived through some very hard times. But the fans have always come out. They've always been supportive. They've always been loyal. It's never been a fair weather city where the fans come when you win, but they don't show up when you lose. No, the fans are here win or lose. That's what makes them great fans.
We're here. And now on Saturdays and Sundays, you and Glenn Mack now get a chance to talk. We have a picture of you and your buddy Glenn, but On Saturdays, I believe from 10 to 1, you guys get a chance to talk to the Philly fans and get us fired up or educate
Sure.
us. The picture is you and Glenn Macnow. Let's take a look at the picture. Your guy, Ray Diddy, and the prof. I listened to you. How's that combination? How's you and your buddy, you and Mr. Macnow? What's that combination like?
Oh, it's great. I mean, it was we didn't really know each other when they put us together. It was the station's idea to put us together. They thought, well, you're both sports writers, so you probably know each other really well. No, we don't. I mean, Glenn worked for the Inquirer. I worked for the Daily News. We were competitors, if anything. I knew him from being in the press box. We would say hello, but that was kind of it. And so when they told us to work together, I thought, okay, fine. I mean, I knew he was a good writer, and he was doing a lot of radio at that time. And so they said, starting this Saturday, we want you guys to work together. And they called it the Saturday Sports Page because we were both still at the newspaper. And fine, I'll do it, no problem. And and it just clicked. It just we really liked each other. He's a very smart guy with wide-ranging interests, and he was always wanting to add different elements to the show. So he said, why don't we do something called What We're Watching, and we'll review movies and we'll review TV, just to sort of change the subject once in a while. And then, then 2 years ago when COVID came along, he said, why don't we do something called Tell Us Your Story? And we'll do a 1 hour interview with somebody, just because there were no sports to talk about. So we'll bring a different person on every week and have him for 1 hour just talk about his life. So you get, Dick Vermeil and Bernie Perrant and George Foreman and all these guys. And that was a huge hit. So, Glenn's yeah, he's a very creative guy. I mean, he comes up, when you're working with Glenn, it's never just, let's put out the phone numbers and wait for people to call. I mean, it's a very high energy, different kind of stuff with a lot of different topics on the table. And it's actually terrific fun. I mean, I enjoy working with him. I look forward to it. Saturday morning, I get up and I'm ready to go, because it's really like hanging out for 3 hours with a good friend. It's more that kind of feeling of, oh yeah, I'm going to go hang out with Glenn for 3 hours. And by the way, we're going to be on the radio. But it's actually like just going over to somebody's house and just sitting around the kitchen table talking. That's how it feels. And I think that's one of the reasons why people like it.
You guys make a phenomenal combination. We're about to wrap up, but before we do, I got to show this clip. It's you sharing some thoughts about the Dallas Cowboys. Ray Diddy, quiet, laid back, Ray Diddy's talking about the Dallas Cowboys. A brief clip. Let's take a look.
But we'll be there again this Sunday night doing pre and post game for Eagles Cowboys. And I would suggest don't miss it, because the Eagles will kick the Cowboys' butts.
Yeah, I love it. Right, we conclude every show with our guests giving us a mini, M-I-N-I, a mini keynote. Since I'm a speaker, I want our guests to share some words of encouragement, inspiration for the rest of the year, for the rest of our lives. You've been covering Philadelphia sports for over 50 years. Ray, what advice, well wishes, thoughts you have for Philadelphia fans, the people who are watching both internationally and internationally? Any concluding thoughts? Let me get the mic ready. Ray Didinger, 30 seconds. Give us your mini keynote on how we can make our tomorrows better than our todays.
My feeling has always been, it's not very complicated. It's just treat people the way you would like to be treated. I just think that's almost a universal golden rule. You don't have to go overboard. Just treat other people, treat the people you encounter, the people who live next door to you, the people you meet on the street, the people you sit next to at the stadium. Treat them the way you would like to be treated. Treat them with that same kind of respect. I think we'd have a better world. And, and for like young people, and you had someone who wrote in a moment ago, and asked about a career in communications, sports writing, sports broadcasting. To me, there's just a couple of touchstones. Be prepared, do your homework, and be yourself. You know, that's really it. I mean, don't try to be somebody else. You know, Steve Sable, my old boss at NFL Films, had a plaque over his desk, and it said, "You were born an original, don't die a copy." And I always thought that was great advice. You know, we're all original in our own way, but too often we decide, I want to be this guy, or I want to be that guy, or I want to do this, or I want to act like that, or I want to be yourself. You know, you were born an original, don't die a copy, because an imitation is just that. It's an imitation.
Mic drop, mic drop. Ray Didinger, Hall of Famer, Philadelphia, Mount Rushmore sports journalist and broadcaster. Thank you for making the time to come to the Dr. James Show and just share your thoughts, your wisdom. I mean, you are Philadelphia sports. So thank you. And for those of you who joined us, I keep telling you every week, informational, transformational. Our guests are phenomenal. You had a Hall of Famer, Ray Didinger, today. Wow. Join us next week. Please bring a friend or two or three. And don't forget, you were just gym-packed. See you later.